Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. I am Audra Mitchell, head of the Massy Learning Institute, and your host for today's session. As we begin, let me take a moment to wish you and your families, your loved ones, a wonderful and amazing 2021. It's going to be a year full of opportunities and possibilities. And as the year started, I reflected, a new year gives us an opportunity to sort of rewrite how we want this year to go. It's an opportunity to determine what type of year do we want to have this year. Yes, 2020 was indeed a very difficult and challenging year for some of us, and also a year of growth, new opportunities and possibilities. So as we begin this year, we really want to encourage you to think about creating the year that you want to have despite the challenges you're going to face. And we will face challenges because life has challenges as well. So it is indeed great to be back with you for our Level Up Webinar Wednesdays. And this year promises to be an even more exciting year with even more exciting topics and presenters to support you and your businesses as we navigate this new reality. Our aim at MLI is to equip you with the tools that will enable you to have a voice in how you respond as 2021 unfolds. And today's webinar is meant to exactly achieve this. Our topic, building resilience. Resilience, how to increase your capacity to embrace change. I mean, as we all know, resilience is a word that we hear quite a lot, right? And it really deals with the fact that how do you respond? How do you bounce back when the challenges come? Because sometimes things really could knock us off our feet. That's why we're excited that we have today's presenter, Ms. Anjen McLean, one of our own, Massy proud. And permit me to share a brief bio, after which I will place you in Anjen's capable hands as she takes you through today's session. So Anjen joined the group in 2015 as the group risk manager. Her role is to assist the businesses in a group to improve their approach to managing the risks in their business. Through training workshops, the development of new policies, and implementation of new tools and processes, companies have been able to improve their risk maturity. 2020 was a critical year for the group and business continuity. 2020 was a critical year for the group and business continuity risk became a priority area. Today, Anjen is going to share with us some lessons on how developing resilience can enable all of us, whether from a personal or professional perspective, to be prepared and even more to be successful in embracing the changes which are just around the corner. Anjen, welcome to our Level Up Webinar Wednesday. We are extremely excited to have you join us.
Thank you. I am excited. Risk managers, we're a little bit like umbrellas. They're good to have around, but it's really only when it rains that we really feel most useful and most called upon. So last year, 2020 into 2021, because our crisis is not fully over, I've had opportunity to really put a lot of lessons into practice, work with the businesses, but also reflect on what lessons comes out of this new crisis. So yes, I've been in risk management quite some time. And I guess if I look back on the 2001 dot-com recession, that's probably when I first got into this area. Then there was the 2008 financial crisis. And now we had COVID last year, plus Trumpism. And it really seems as there's always something around the corner. So for risk managers, we live in a period of calm, always anticipating or with some certainty of knowledge that there is going to be something coming around. And how can we work to prepare for that? So we're always waiting and anticipating change. So I'm really happy to share some of these lessons that when I look back on what has happened, how can we put a mechanism or put an approach in place where we're always ready? Not just, okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stories that we're familiar with during this crisis. I'm going to talk about the importance of resilience in adapting to change. And I'm going to talk about it both from the business perspective, but also in our personal lives. Very often I take the lessons from work and I bring it home. My poor kids, they're always the subject of my testing out new ideas and theories, and it absolutely works and it applies in our personal space. And I'm going to talk about how to use vulnerability to build strength. So we've heard about the lesson about the pizza shop. The pizza shop at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis that re-engineered, used their equipment, re-engineered the materials to build masks, and how they found their purpose serving the nearby hospitals in doing that. We've heard stories, personal stories about people who've been given a diagnosis or bad news. Recently in the newspaper, I read about a woman who had serious health problems, polycystic ovaries, and she took that diagnosis to radically change her diet, but also form a new business based on this new way of living, and she's making more money than she did in the past. So there are always these stories of people who have taken adversity and somehow changed it into something really positive. And I see it as ordinary people being superheroes. And we connect with them because we love their story of how they've taken adversity and really triumphed. So I want to talk about resilience, because that's really what we admire in these people, that people just like ourselves, or even business stories that should have failed. They should have failed, but they find something in themselves. They find a way, a mindset, an approach that really takes what they have and builds upon that to succeed. So how do they do that? And in a way, when I look at COVID-19, is it a threat? Was it a threat? Or was it opportunities? I remember hearing Gervais Warner, our group CEO, say that COVID-19 was the biggest stress test for the group. And I think, well, for some companies in the group it was, but for some things, it was the best thing that has happened. And I've also heard Gervais say, COVID-19 was the best thing that happened to Massy. Why? Because it unleashed creativity. I saw many of our employees actually respond and post comments saying that finally we can have flexible working conditions, you know, and I know not everybody likes work from home, but for some of us, this has been the best thing that has happened to us. It's brought so much balance. So not every crisis brings disruption, and not every change is negative. But we don't always respond to change in the same way. Some people have a greater capacity to embrace change and to really make it work for them. So wouldn't it be great if we could figure out, since we know that change is always going to be there, change is constant. We know that there will be crises. We see that there is a pattern from the past and some really disruptive. So how can we build that capacity in us so that we embrace change, whether it's good, so that we can maximize opportunities, or if it's disruptive, it's not disruptive to us in a way that detracts us from our objectives. So in researching for this, you know, one of the things that I like to do is to use practical examples. And I'm using the Willow because I have I like gardening, and I have a fondness for willows, for trees that show some sort of ability to teach us something about life. So the willow, I have this quote, it's the green weed which bends in the wind, and it's stronger than the mighty oak which breaks in a storm. So the willow, some of you are familiar with it, there's the image of the weeping willow, which usually grows near to water, and it is beautiful. There are these soft tendrils, these leaves that look so ethereal, they're so soft. But if you look at the bark, it's all gnarly and bent, and it can bend all the way down, full 90 degrees, but it lasts forever. Willows can grow more than 100 years. So I liked this image of the willow that shows incredible strength through flexibility. And in doing some research, I learned that the wood is extremely strong. It's used to make cricket bats. So that tells you about the strength. And it gets this strength from deep roots and its cellular structure that allows it to bend and change, but not break. In other words, the resilience of the willow doesn't come from one thing. It comes from many facets and many aspects of its being. Deep roots, strong wood, good cellular structure. It comes in many varieties. So yes, we're familiar with one, but you can actually find, I think, more than 230 varieties of the willow. It grows anywhere, in many conditions. So you can find it in drought, you can find it near water. It grows in many climates. It is home to a lot of pests. So there are a lot of animals, pests, parasites that actually live in the willow. So you probably wouldn't want to lean up on one, as beautiful as it looks. So it tells me that this tree knows how to live and thrive with stress. And that's really, really important for us. You can say that this is a metaphor for life, and it's a great example of the human condition. If we can be like the willow that really has different facets within us, within our capabilities, that allows us to deal with stress in a way that we're always evergreen, that we live long, and that we can deal with whatever comes to us. That says that we should actually be very fulfilled people as well as businesses. So think of businesses that have endured. There aren't many, Massy being one of them. We have endured a lot of change. So within this time of immense change and immense uncertainty, we have a new variant of COVID, we have a new administration in the White House. Many of our businesses across the Caribbean region are facing a lot of uncertainty in terms of how governments are going to respond, whether tourism is going to come back. So how can we build in our lives and in our business that capacity to be resilient, but resilient in a way that serves purpose? So the willow is used actually for many medicines, and many medical conditions can be cured from properties in the willow. Headaches, cancer, flu, arthritis. It's beautiful. So that purpose is not compromised by its resilience. In fact, it probably is even more useful because of that. So a lot of this stress brings out characteristics that actually leads to greater usefulness. And that, I think, is also a lesson for us as we move on. So, okay, where do we go to find lessons that builds resilience? And if you've attended any of my workshops before, you know that I like to bring lots of practical examples into bringing out a point. So I've chosen the 3 little pigs, which I've used in previous workshops on business continuity. The 3 little pigs is an ultimate lesson in business continuity planning. We have 3 pigs who build houses, and only the one with the strongest house, survives the adventure. So it's a really great lesson about the importance of business continuity planning. But as I looked into it a little bit further and as I prepared for this workshop, it actually has more important lessons on resilience. And that resilience is around how can we be strong no matter what comes. So here are 5 lessons that you can take away from this workshop, from the lesson of the 3 little pigs. You will never think of the 3 little pigs story in the same way again. Lessons on resilience. 1, clarity of purpose. It's important to know the goals to achieve, and it's important to know why. Why is it that those goals are important? So thinking through the story of the 3 little pigs, do you remember why these pigs needed to build a house? Because they'd been kicked out. Their mother could no longer afford to feed them. They'd grown too big. I feel a little bit the same now with my children under COVID-19. They're eating everything, and it's only because they're underage I can't do the same thing like this mother pig. But they had become adult pigs and they needed to find their way. So again, it was an instance of change, of stress that forced them to now go out and achieve a new home. And each one of them interpreted it differently. So one who's probably said, well, I'm going to be here for a short time. I'm just going to build a temporary structure. The second said, this could be something, sort of retirement home or, a camping home. I'm going to be back and forth. I'm going to build a house of sticks. And the third pig built a home that aligned with his why, which was one of more stability. So the first 2 pigs built places where they can stay because they no longer had a home. But the third one built a sanctuary, and that really speaks to their why. They each had the same goal, but they had different purpose. And that's really important, and I'll get into that later. The second lesson on resilience is the wolf is coming. I talked about there have been crises before, financial crisis, recession, we're living through one now. And as human beings, we tend to think, it's not coming, it won't happen to me. But there is a wolf. There is going to be some sort of crisis in each one of our lives, in our businesses. Many of our businesses now across the group are going through changes. Some are being divested. We had the massive change last year of the portfolio structure, and that brought a lot of change. And now we're living through COVID. What if there's a COVID-20? There will be something coming. When I did my research, this pandemic was predicted in 2015 by Bill Gates. He said, he sent a warning, there will be a pandemic. We are not prepared. It is coming. And then when I looked further, since 2008, scientists have been talking about there will be a large pandemic. There will be a global pandemic. It's coming. The financial crisis in 2008 was predicted a year in advance. So yet we still think that there aren't going to be major disruptive events around the corner. We've been hearing about climate change, but how many of us really take it seriously as this is coming and is really going to have an impact on all Caribbean economies, on all Latin American and across the world? What is that going to look like for each of us? And am I ready? So it's really important to really start thinking there will be a disruptive change, and I will prepare myself to be resilient in spite of it and not cower from it. The third lesson is resilience in normal times means strength to deal with disasters. So if we think of the 3 little pigs, they built houses that for the first 2 probably would not have survived a good flood. would not have survived fires, and certainly could not survive the big bad. They were not solid structures in normal times. How could they survive a large disaster when it comes? For us personally, you know, we probably each have business continuity plans. You know, we think, all right, if something happens, I have insurance. I know what I can do for my kids. You know, each of us have a business continuity plan. We have an idea of what we would do if something really goes wrong. But do we have a resiliency strategy such that if it does go wrong, we can still continue and we can still thrive? And if that's not a reality now in normal times, it's not going to really work out well when a disaster comes along. So let me give you an example. Each of them had a BCP plan, and it was fairly more or less the same. Send the alarm, resist, run. First pig, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. That was the first one. And then when that didn't work, run to your brother's house. Second, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Doesn't work out, run to your brother's house. They each had a business continuity plan. But in building their structures and building their business, they did not build for resilience. And the third pig did both. He had resilience, and when the storm came and when the wolf came, he was also attacked. But because of how he built his business continuity plan, which was also not by the hair of my chinny chin chin, it worked better. And not only that, he could offer refuge to his brothers. And it goes back to the why. He built a sanctuary and he didn't build a home. So understanding purpose, knowing that it's coming, and really building resilience for normal times was really critical in building resiliency. The fourth lesson is building resilience takes extra effort. It does. It took more work for that third little pig. And the effort of conscious awareness and planning and always thinking through and having contingency for normal times so that we're prepared for disaster also takes effort. And I'm going to show you a way where we can start this in a way that's simple and accessible, but I'm not going to lie to you that it will take some time to stop, change habits, and start putting things in place, but it pays off. And obviously the fifth lesson is events can come in several areas, multi-event disasters. So think about that multi-island storm, hurricane that hit Bahamas, went up to Puerto Rico, came back again. You know, so there are events that can hit us several times. So way of thinking of that is we're still dealing with COVID. What if there were a new disaster that we also had to deal with while also not having gotten over this crisis? In other words, another way is, having gone through this crisis, are you strong enough to go through a new one? How much resiliency is there left in your business so that you can also take on new threats and take advantage of opportunities? So these are 5 lessons, and I'd like to actually go through and talk a little bit about strategies we can use to build resilience. And that starts with an assessment of vulnerability. So isn't that strange? We think of vulnerability as weakness. So how, Anjen, can we then use vulnerabilities to start being stronger? That's odd. So the definition of vulnerability is actually the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked. The quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked. That's the definition of vulnerability. There's no mention of weakness in that definition. So when the third little pig understood what he needed to achieve and how he was going to build a sanctuary, he understood that he needed to assess the possibility of being attacked. This exercise is not about getting rid of vulnerabilities. It's really about understanding it so that we put strategies in place that make us resilient. Resilience comes from a deep understanding of the vulnerabilities. And that's in our personal lives, but as well as our businesses. For those of you who are working on updating your business continuity plan, as I know some of you are, if you don't address vulnerabilities as part of that, you can update your business continuity plan and you still haven't fortified yourself. You still haven't made yourself more resilient. So that's really critical. And I'm going to go through these really simple steps that we can apply personally, but as well as in a business to get resilience through an understanding of vulnerability. So we want to start with our purpose, and I describe that as who do you serve. But talking about purpose for some of us, it feels a little bit hard. You know, it feels as if this is sort of a large, almost mystical objective that we want to have. You know, I want to be like Mother Teresa, and I want to save the world. You know, I want to live into my purpose. And we're happy when people can really articulate what that is. For our group, it's that force for good. What does that really mean and break down into in terms of goals and objectives? So I usually say, start with what? Start with what you want to achieve. And that's really easy for many of us. In our personal capacities as a mother, wife, parent, grandparents, etc., we can really do a good job about articulating what's important and what we want to achieve. And in our businesses, that's fairly easy to do in terms of articulating objectives. We do it every year. But the why, the purpose, is sometimes a little bit difficult. So I'll give you an example. I recently I'm working with one of our companies around just this exercise, and I asked the CEO, what do you want to achieve at Massy company? And he said, well, Anjen, make money, increase revenue, increase profits. Yeah, okay, great. That sounds great, yes. But why? I really pressed him to say, why? What is that unique competitive advantage that's going to make customers come to you before they go elsewhere? What is that unique characteristic that's going to make your staff want to work for you rather than go to the competitor for a little bit more money? What is your why? And he thought about it and he said, our why is to delight customers. We really want to delight our customers. And that blew my mind because it opened up a whole host of creativity that we could use as we went through the vulnerability assessment. It became a North Star that we can say, okay, if X or Y happens, how can we prioritize resources, activities to protect assets that deliver on delighting customers? So really articulating the objectives and goals is an important start. But if you can take a little bit more effort to define what is that why that drives purpose, the reason behind objectives and goals, is really going to be critical as we go through some of the other aspects of vulnerability assessment. When I looked at the response of Massy stores, for example, in COVID-19, the way they responded showed me that perhaps their why really prioritize meeting the needs of all the budgets of their customers. So they really drilled in on making available to customers affordable package. Here in Trinidad, it's a grocery bag that's pre-packed with all the necessary items, because they understood that not everyone could stock up on, all the groceries that they might want, but certainly every Massy Stores customer needs to have the groceries that they need. And the way they went about doing that really showed how they prioritize the needs of their customers, the safety of their customers, safety of staff, before the other competitors did. So Massy Stores really took the lead in that. So really that articulated to me that they understood not just what they needed to achieve, which was still profitability and all of that, but they did it in a way that demonstrated their why. And that's really critical. The second step is to think about who are the people and partners that will help us to achieve those goals. That could be staff, that can be suppliers, those who supply core services. But in our own personal space, who are the people that we rely on to achieve our own goals? So is it our babysitters, our helpers? During the crisis when everyone was under lockdown, it was amazing to hear friends talk about, oh, I can't wait for this lockdown to be over for my helper to come back. And they actually recognize that this person played an integral part in their ability to function and get their own job done. So we have a way, obviously, of looking at people around us and maybe taking them for granted through a vulnerability assessment, both in the business space as well as in our personal space. Who are the people that we really depend on to achieve our goals? And then this is the other part. Who would we prioritize in making sure that they were valued and protected, because we understood that without them, we couldn't achieve our objectives. So looking at people, partners, suppliers, third party, and prioritizing those that matter most, and then going through and assessing the vulnerabilities. Maybe in staff, do we need some more contract workers? Do we need to look at those employee engagement surveys and really drill in who are the people that we really need to hone in and focus on, because we know that they're key to our resilience strategy. Third, our activities. So from a business perspective, this would be the processes, the activities that matter most. For Massy Stores under COVID, we understood the importance of cashiers, our frontline staff. If we didn't before, certainly here's a crisis that demonstrates who we need to, what activities we need to prioritize most. Getting goods perhaps from the back store to the front might be really important. But in our personal space, what are those actions that we are involved in that are really critical? And this, if it didn't happen, we would be, our vulnerabilities would be such that we would not be able to achieve our goals. Information. So there are different ways you can look at this. From a data perspective in the business case, what is the data that's most important that we need to protect? Currently, the group is completing an IT governance and risk assessment that's going to help us to do that. But this is an area where we can apply it not just from a sort of abstract IT or data and then give it to the IT managers. What is that data that we really need to understand, either from a customer profile or in terms of the data we need to protect from a privacy and confidentiality? And have we put enough resources in place to do that? From a strategy perspective, what's the data that we really need to have to enable strategy? So our way of looking at information and really assessing the vulnerability is going to really enable us to put strategies in place that enables resilience. Every financial crisis, or rather every global crisis that has taken place, has a financial element. for businesses, they all need access to liquidity. So having extra funding available, the relationships with banks, looking at how much credit they're holding is something that happens to both businesses as well as individuals. So finances is always a critical element of a vulnerability assessment. In our personal space, now is a good time to really do a financial assessment and understand, under a stress scenario, do I have enough liquidity to pay, if I were to get a significant medical bill? If I wanted to take a loan, could I do that because of my current financial credit rating? So finances is an area that we tend to shy away from, some of us in our personal space, but ultimately it's the one that really becomes a deal breaker in a stress situation. And from a business perspective, fortress balance sheets, having strong balance sheets, is really what will help us get out of a crisis faster than our competitors. Finally, in terms of physical aspects, we can think of our home, other investments we've made into, either, a second home, boats, or even our business. From a commercial sense, what are the branches that we want to prioritize? When I worked with Massy United around their catastrophe planning, we had to prioritize which of the locations that matter more. So vulnerability assessment is a way to go through all these different areas and then decide which are the assets we need to prioritize and protect more than others, and what are the existing vulnerabilities we need to be aware of to deal with that. So I'm going to use a simple personal example of something I'd gone through just recently to demonstrate how we can apply this model in our personal space. So during the Christmas, just before Christmas, I was reading the papers and I saw a property for sale in Tobago. I looked at the price and I said, "Whoa, this is a good price." And immediately, for some reason, it captured my imagination. And I said, wouldn't it be nice to have, a second property that I can use for vacation, maybe rent out? And my mind went on a huge tangent of the possibility. So I jumped uncharacteristically for me, I jumped on a boat. And if any of you are not familiar with Trinidad, so Trinidad is a twin island public, Trinidad and Tobago. And Tobago is a smaller island which we can access by boat or plane. It's a 3-hour boat ride. So I jumped on a boat, 3 hours to Tobago, checked out the property, and then jumped in my car, went back to the port, 3 hours back. And I fell in love with it. I knew what the garden plan would look like. I knew what the house would look like. And I said, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to go for it. And then I actually went about proceeding to see, okay, what are the finances? I think I can afford it. I'm going to go for this opportunity. So I'm going to demonstrate how I can take an opportunity and put it in this model in a way that helps me to understand the vulnerabilities and helps me to make a decision. So I looked at, who are the people and the partners that I need to be dependent on to make this dream come true. Notice I didn't start with the goals and the purpose. I jumped right in. And I said, well, it's in Tobago, it's another island. I'm going to have challenges getting contractors and people who know what's going on. So tick, I understand that vulnerability. And I came up with solutions where I could, put something in place with if things go wrong. I said, well, what are the activities that I need to be aware of if I want this dream to come true? And I went through all the financing, putting an offer through, and what this would look like from a COVID perspective. Because as you know, getting permissions, everything is more expensive and just slower under COVID. So I understood that vulnerability. I didn't go through information. Not all of these would be relevant, but when I got to finances, that's when I had to stop. And I said, okay, I can afford this. I know how I'm going to finance it. And I said, okay, we're good to go. Physical assets didn't matter. But then I went up to goals and objectives. I never really wanted to have any time before a second property in Tobago. So it wasn't part of my goals. I said, okay, I know that my biggest vulnerability is around finances. I can afford it, but I can afford it at a cost. And this opportunity, as great as it is actually was never part of my goals. So what do? Do I make it one of my new goals, goal number 4? Or do I reject it? I said, well, no, this is a great opportunity. It's great. I can afford it. It's a great price. I can see how it will benefit me. Let me look at this a bit more. And in going through the financial aspect, I understood that the liquidity vulnerability that it would bring, because I would have to make sacrifices in other areas, is actually going to compromise the top 1 and 2 objectives that I had defined for myself. So this is a way that in understanding the vulnerability and then passing it through again through the objectives and through my why, I have a better understanding of what I am going into fully in going through with this opportunity. In the end, I made a decision not to go through with this investment, because in doing so, if there were a threat, it would undermine my first and second priority, and that would really make me have to compromise on my why. So this is a way that we can apply it both to opportunities, but also to threats. And we can do that. I've just walked through that with you, back of an envelope, to make myself aware of what I'm getting into in exploring an opportunity. So if I had gone ahead, would that have been a bad thing? No, because I was fully aware of what could go wrong, and I had a plan around it. If I had gone through and decided to reprioritize my goals and my purpose, that would not have been a problem either. What would have been a problem if I had jumped on the boat, made the offer, gotten into this, and not have full awareness of what are the risks that I am taking on. So going through this, if you are going through a business continuity plan and you're updating that plan for your business without doing a vulnerability assessment, you will have an updated business continuity plan. But that plan would not take into place the vulnerabilities that exist, and it would not give you an opportunity to build into that a resiliency strategy that would make your business continuity plan even more relevant. And just to sum up here, using this methodology around vulnerability assessment is a really practical tool that we can all use in our personal space, but most importantly, if you are doing this as a business for your department or for your team, you want to use, first of all, what are my objectives and my why, and then run through each of these different areas to come up with a vulnerability assessment, a resiliency strategy, and a business continuity plan. How can you do this in a way that ensures that there aren't blind spots? The best way to do that is to involve others. So many of you in the portfolios that have been part of the risk reset exercise, and risk reset is just mainly a way of identifying our top risks relative to objectives. You're probably wondering, how can I make this relevant at a department level? How can I make this really easy to do? Use this in your team meetings, share with them. How can I make my team more resilient using this approach? How can I make my department more resilient? And what you would find is that if each person brings their own perspective, you have a better, more comprehensive assessment of both the vulnerabilities, but you also get more creativity to be used to come up with really, really strong, resilient plans that gives more flexibility and more ability to embrace changes, whether they're opportunities or they're threats. So final lessons, how do we sum up? Build with a plan for the worst and the best through vulnerability assessments and resiliency strategy. Know your limits. So understand what is that vulnerability that you are not prepared to negotiate on, either because it's outside of your risk appetite or because it doesn't align with your goals, your purpose, and your why. And finally, if you put all this in place, you'll realize that every crisis brings an opportunity. And so it's just a question of how do we adapt to changes. There aren't any good or bad. It's just an opportunity to build and dig deep within our organizations, our own capacity personally, to really continue to live into our purpose. I hope that you have found this workshop useful, and I'll hand over to Audra.
Great. Thank you, Anjen. Not only for sharing and taking us through such good models as well, but even sharing your personal example to really show how the framework works, and actually that we can use what you've shared either personally or professionally. So thank you for that. I'll hand you over to Rennie now, who has received just a couple of questions while the presentation was going through. Rennie, we just have a couple of questions that we'll have raised to you.
Thank you, Audra. Thank you, Anjen. Okay, so I'll go right into our first, well, it's a comment, but I can pull a question from it. It's an anonymous person, and they're saying, it seems as if the third pig also had more resources for building. So what if you don't have resources like the third pig?
I love that question. So if I were the pig with who probably didn't have resources, the first pig that built a house of straw, if I understood my vulnerability, I would have to use creativity to think, how can I still get resilience? And it might be go and get some mud, because if you put mud with straw, you actually end up with a house that is just as strong as the bricks. So resources is not a limitation on resilience, because we know stories of people who have done amazing with nothing. They've started and you've seen them build. You know, we have our local stories across the Caribbean. We have Butch Stewart, who passed away recently. We have our own heroes. That's what a hero is. He's just like any one of us, but he finds a way to use things which ordinary and turns it into something amazing. So resources, yes, the third little pig had more resources. He probably worked harder for those as well. But I don't think that's an excuse to against being resilient.
Great, I love that answer, thank you. Our next person is also anonymous. How do you build resilience when so many people around you have so many challenges?
I'd like to hear a little bit more around that. So resilience really comes from within. A lot of people do have challenges, but I think, let me give you a story of Stacey Abrams. If you know Stacey Abrams, Stacey Abrams is a senator from Georgia. Actually, she's not a senator, but she was very instrumental in getting the two new senators from Georgia, Reverend Warner and Joe Ossoff, to be the new senators that has actually put the Democrats in the lead in the Senate. You can tell I've been watching a lot of CNN. The story of Stacey Abrams is very interesting. I encourage you to go listen to her talk on TED. She comes from a family of 6 children. And as she said, her parents were poor, but they weren't satisfied with that poverty. They also decided to become ministers, both of them. So that's even poorer than poor. And when she decided to become a politician and to run for governor, she had huge debt, over 200,000 in student debts and loans. Her parents were ill, so she had to use some of her money to pay for their medical expenses. She still ran for governor and she lost. And after she lost, the day after she lost, she picked herself up and said, I'm going to form Fair Fight. So there are instances where you are surrounded by people who are also struggling. How do you pick yourself up and lift your head above that in a way that you can actually be purposeful and useful to others and help them? So the way to do that is really to focus very much on what do I want to achieve and why? Because when you get knocked down, it's the why that's going to give you a reason to not stay down. And it's the why that's also going to give you a reason to inspire others. So as leaders in the business, if you are part of, as I have experienced, if you are part of a team that's really negative, if you are part of a company where you feel frustrated, how do you lift yourself out of that and show resilience? And you can look around and see people and examples who have done that. In spite of their environment, there is something about them that they're still able to see differently. And this is the point. If we can find other people who've done that, that means it is a habit that we can embrace so that we can do it too. You don't have to have the right conditions, the right people around to really focus on what do I want to achieve and why, and how do I use that to drive through and build resilience. The tool around vulnerability assessment gives you a way to really go through in a step-by-step methodological way to do that. But it really still starts with why and that belief.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we just have time for maybe one more. Do you ever get to a stage where you can be deemed to be resilient, or is it always a journey?
It's always a journey. Do you know why? Because change is always coming. So I like this question. We have companies across the group who are putting in continuous improvement programs, either through a new IT system, new initiative that is going to change, that is going to address certain areas, like certain weaknesses, but it's also going to create new vulnerabilities. So if before putting in this project, you knew your vulnerabilities, you put in an improvement, and you don't do a new vulnerability assessment, then you are not going to be ready for the new changes that's going to come, that's going to just work differently. So if we're always changing and if our environment is always changing, then of course, vulnerability assessment is always continuous. And that's why I advocate in our businesses, this just should be conversations that we should be having on a regular basis, because in doing so, it gives opportunity, a space where creativity can feed on that opportunity and bring something new. But it also makes us aware so that when something happens, we can move quickly. Is this going to make us dodge every bullet? No, of course not. Is it going to make us able to respond faster and really see opportunities to thrive in spite of disruption? Absolutely. It's a muscle that I'm encouraging us all to build.
Okay, so we just had one more drop in, so I'll just ask this one and then this will be the last one. Could you explain a little bit more about how we equip or build resilience in our employees?
I like this question, and it's not hard, but it really takes that openness. So I'm going to look at Audra's picture behind. A force for good, creating value, transforming lives. That's how we do it. So we do that by empowering our employees. I'm going to speak truth here. Our group is very traditional, and we tend to think the managers will sort it out. Isn't that true? But if we have supervisors here, if you take the step to just have this conversation, this one that I've just had that took less than maybe 30 minutes to present, and you just have that conversation, tell me, how did you get through COVID-19? How do you think we did as a department? And what do you think are the new vulnerabilities we faced? That's a start. If you did that as a department lead and have at your department meetings a way to have this conversation and give people permission to contribute, I guarantee you're going to come up with so much information that you never knew before, but also an energy to create and to build stronger, because it's a natural instinct. Once we're given the opportunity to identify and see a problem, and we're given the permission to do something about it, that's where creativity lies. And if you're a CEO of a company, you have the power to say, hi, this is something I'm going to just build in to how we act normally. And these are conversations that we're going to have on a regular basis. It's a simple conversation, but it really does require that permission to speak and a permission to act and permission to create. That's not hard, but it does take that change in purpose.
Thank you so much, Anjen. I hand back over now to Audra.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Rennie. And once again, Anjen, on behalf of all our attendees today on MLI, we really would like to thank you for sharing so powerfully with us. I actually want to read a comment that Adriana put into the chat, which really echoes how I'm sure many of us feel. Adriana said, thank you very much for the manner and content of this workshop. It's so useful for work and for personal planning and strategizing. And we certainly feel the same, you know. And I know most of all, the Three Little Pigs, I will never look at that the same way anymore, right? You know, you put a lot of strategy and resilience into these stories. So I think I'll probably kind of look at some of the other stories or newsrooms we grew up with to see, you know, is there something in there for us?
Absolutely.
So once again, go ahead.
So if you are, as a company, working on updating your business continuity plan and you'd like to incorporate some of that, reach out to us. We can make these templates available. We can give you some coaching on how you can do this in a more structured way with your staff. But certainly I like this because it's applicable both to personal, but it's a really powerful tool within business as well. So our Group Risk team, that's what we're here for. It's still raining, so.
Great, so thank you so much, Anjen. So once again, thank you all our attendees for participating in this, and we hope that today has given you a sense of encouragement, you know, and with the tools that Anjen and the methodologies Anjen took us through really will help us as we navigate and we chart what 2021 is going to look like. So the more empowered we are, the more resilient we can become, and yes, it's a journey, but certainly with the tools shared and us really applying it personally and professionally, it can make a difference between us feeling like a victim to our circumstances or really feeling like we are in charge and we want to shape our future. So thank you. I also would like to thank my MLI team, without whom this wouldn't be possible, and our tech support team, Jamon, you know, partner with us in this journey. And for all of you, we want to ask you to continue to look out for our upcoming programs, you know, sign up for programs or webinars. And we want to continue to ask you to continue to focus on being safe and on leveling up. We are in interesting and very different times. So the more that we upskill and become better prepared, the better we can respond. So bye everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. It's certainly been a pleasure being here with you all this morning. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks again, Anjen.